2:45 a.m., February 15th, 1945, USS Missouri, Leyte Gulf, Philippines. Seaman First Class Tommy Rodriguez crouched beneath the forward 16-inch gun turret, listening to the metallic groan of the battleship's hull as she cut through the pre-dawn swells. The air tasted of salt spray and gun oil. Somewhere in the darkness, Japanese kamikaze pilots were forming up for what intelligence called the largest suicide attack of the Pacific War. Rodriguez knew something the Navy didn't. Their radar was about to fail them. For 6 months, Rodriguez had been tracking a pattern. Every major kamikaze attack began the same way. Japanese aircraft approached at wave-top level, below radar coverage, then climbed suddenly for their final dives. American radar operators, trained to sweep the horizon at medium altitude, missed the initial approach. By the time contacts appeared on screens, the kamikazes were already committed to their attack runs, too close to intercept, too fast to stop. The problem wasn't the radar equipment. The AN/SPS-6 air search radar was the most advanced system in the Pacific Fleet. Range of 200 miles, could track 100 targets simultaneously. The problem was doctrine. Radar operators swept in predictable patterns, focusing on established threat corridors, following procedures written in peacetime by officers who had never faced a suicidal enemy. Rodriguez wasn't a radar operator. He was an electronics technician. His job was maintaining the equipment, not using it. But he'd spent countless hours listening to operator chatter, watching the sweep patterns, seeing how kamikazes exploited the gaps. He'd identified the blind zones. He knew how to fix them. The morning of February 15th brought reports of massive Japanese air activity. Over 400 aircraft launching from Kyushu airfields. Every available kamikaze pilot in the empire throwing everything at the American fleet before the invasion of Iwo Jima. The Missouri and Red Task Force represented the largest concentration of American naval power in the Pacific. Destroying it would cripple the invasion timeline. Rodriguez had tried to explain his observations to Lieutenant Commander Harris, the ship's radar officer. Harris listened politely, then dismissed him. "Seamen don't develop tactical doctrine," Harris said. "That's what officers are for. Stick to your maintenance duties." But Rodriguez knew Harris was wrong. He'd seen the pattern 14 times. Every major kamikaze attack followed the same profile. Low approach, sudden climb, final dive. American radar doctrine couldn't counter it because American radar doctrine assumed rational pilots who valued their own survival. Kamikazes had abandoned survival. That changed everything. The intercom crackled at 0312 hours. All hands to battle stations. Massive air contacts approaching from the northwest. Estimated time to engagement, 47 minutes. Rodriguez climbed to the radar compartment. The AN/SPS-6 console hummed with electronic activity. 3 operators hunched over their displays, sweeping methodically through assigned sectors. Rodriguez watched the sweep patterns. Horizon to 15,000 feet. Standard doctrine. Perfect for intercepting conventional bombers. Useless against sea-skimming kamikazes. The operators were looking in the wrong place at the wrong altitude. They'd missed the initial approach completely. "Contact bearing 315, range 180 miles, Harris called out. "Large formation, estimated 50-plus aircraft, altitude 12,000 feet. Vector interceptors to engage." Rodriguez studied the display. The contacts were exactly where doctrine predicted they should be. High altitude, long range, conventional approach. But something felt wrong. The formation was too neat, too predictable. Real kamikaze attacks were chaotic, desperate. This looked like a diversion. He moved to the secondary radar console. Nobody was manning it. All attention focused on the primary threat. Rodriguez activated the set, adjusted the sweep pattern. Instead of scanning the horizon at medium altitude, he focused the beam low, wave top level, where doctrine said nothing dangerous could approach. The screen lit up immediately. Dozens of contacts, maybe 60 aircraft approaching at 0 altitude, range 95 miles and closing fast. They'd been invisible to the primary radar because they were flying below the normal search pattern. In 23 minutes, they'd climbed suddenly and hit the fleet before anyone knew they were coming. Rodriguez grabbed the intercom. "Contact bearing 290, 0 altitude, range 95 miles, large formation approaching below radar coverage." Harris looked at him sharply. "You're not authorized to operate that equipment, Seaman. Return to your station." "Sir, there are 60 kamikazes approaching at wave top level. They'll be on us in 20 minutes. "Impossible," Harris replied. "The ANSPS-6 would detect any significant air activity. You're reading sea return or equipment malfunction." But Rodriguez knew what he was seeing. The contacts were moving too fast to be sea return, too organized to be malfunction. The Japanese had learned to exploit American radar doctrine. They were using the high-altitude formation as a decoy, while the real attack approached invisibly below the search pattern.
Harris ordered Rodriguez away from the console. Protocol was clear. Only qualified radar operators could manage the equipment during combat operations. Rodriguez was maintenance personnel. His job was keeping the radar working, not interpreting the data. Rodriguez returned to the electronics bay, but he didn't stop tracking the low-altitude contacts. He'd rigged a secondary display in the maintenance area, technically for equipment testing. Now he used it to monitor the approaching kamikazes. Range, 75 miles. Speed, 240 knots. Time to contact, 19 minutes. He tried the intercom again. 0 altitude contacts bearing 29er, range 75 miles. Request permission to alert Combat Information Center? Harris cut him off. "Seaman Rodriguez, you are ordered to cease unauthorized radar operations immediately. Report to the chief for disciplinary action." Rodriguez looked at his improvised display. Range 60 miles. The kamikazes would climb soon, transitioning from sea-skimming approach to terminal dive attack. Once they climbed, the primary radar would detect them, but by then interception would be impossible. The fleet's fighter cover was chasing the high-altitude decoy formation 200 miles northwest. No aircraft in position to engage the real threat. Silence held for 3 minutes. Then Rodriguez made his choice. He activated the ship's general alarm. The piercing wail echoed through every compartment. On the bridge, Captain Murray demanded an explanation. Rodriguez grabbed the main communications circuit, bypassed the radar officer completely. 60 kamikazes bearing 29er, range 45 miles, climbing to attack altitude. Estimate impact in 12 minutes. All fighters engaged wrong target. Fleet defense is compromised. Harris burst into the electronics bay, furious. "You've just violated direct orders and created false alarm conditions. You'll face court-martial for this." But Captain Murray's voice cut through the argument. "Rodriguez, are you certain of these contacts?" "Yes, sir. They've been approaching at 0 altitude for 30 minutes, using the high formation as a decoy. They're climbing now, transitioning to attack profile." Murray didn't hesitate. "All ships, emergency turn to starboard, maximum defensive fire. Recall all fighters immediately, vector to bearing 29er. The Missouri heeled hard to starboard. Her massive 16-inch guns couldn't engage aircraft, but her secondary armament could. 20mm and 40mm guns swiveled toward the northwest. Across the task force, 47 warships executed the same maneuver. The kamikazes appeared on primary radar at 0347 hours, range 22 miles, altitude 8,000 feet, diving fast, exactly where Rodriguez had predicted. The high-altitude decoy formation was still 180 miles away, still drawing American fighters away from the real battle. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from the task force. Tracers streaked across the dawn sky. The first kamikaze exploded at 12,000 yards, then another. The concentrated defensive fire was devastating, but 60 aircraft against 47 ships meant multiple attacks per target. Some would get through. Rodriguez watched from his unauthorized radar position as the surviving kamikazes selected targets. The Missouri drew 3 aircraft. Her defensive fire brought down 2. The third broke through, diving straight for the bridge superstructure. The kamikaze struck the Missouri's forward deck at 0351 hours. The explosion killed 11 sailors, wounded 23 others, but the ship survived. Damage control teams contained the fires. The Missouri remained operational, continued fighting. Across the task force, 7 other ships took kamikaze hits. The destroyer Evans sank with 73 casualties. The cruiser Portland suffered catastrophic damage but stayed afloat. In 16 minutes of combat, the Japanese lost 52 aircraft. American losses were severe but manageable. Without Rodriguez's early warning, the result would have been catastrophic. The kamikazes would have achieved complete tactical surprise. Instead of 16 minutes of defensive fire, they would have faced perhaps 3 minutes. Instead of losing 87% of their aircraft, they might have lost 30%. Instead of sinking 1 destroyer, they might have sunk 6 ships. Captain Murray found Rodriguez in the electronics bay after the battle. The compartment reeked of ozone and burned insulation. Rodriguez was checking radar components for battle damage, still doing his job. Murray asked one question. "How did you know?" Rodriguez explained the pattern. 6 months of observations, kamikaze tactics that exploited radar doctrine, the blind zones that American procedures created. The solution was simple. Stop looking where doctrine said threats should be. Start looking where the enemy actually was. Murray listened without interruption. When Rodriguez finished, Murray made a decision that would ripple through the Pacific Fleet. "You're hereby appointed acting radar supervisor," Murray said. "Effective immediately. Your job is training radar operators to see what doctrine says doesn't exist." Harris protested. "Rodriguez isn't qualified. He lacks proper training, certification, authority to develop operational procedures." Murray cut him off. "Harris, you're relieved. Report to the navigator for reassignment. Rodriguez saved this ship and half the task force. I'm less interested in his qualifications than his results." Within a week, Rodriguez's low-altitude search technique spread to every radar operator in the 7th Fleet. The modification was simple. Dedicate 1 operator to wave-top scanning while others maintain standard patterns. Split the search coverage between conventional threats and sea-skimming attacks. The Japanese tried the same decoy tactic 3 more times in February 1945. None succeeded. American radar operators were watching the right altitude. Kamikaze formations were detected during their approach phase, not their terminal dive attack. Fighter interception became possible again. Japanese intelligence noticed the change immediately. Kamikaze effectiveness declined by 64% between February and April 1945. American defensive doctrine had adapted faster than Japanese offensive doctrine could counter-adapt. The tactical advantage shifted permanently. But the cost wasn't just statistical. Rodriguez's innovation required splitting radar coverage, reducing detection range for conventional threats. It was a calculated risk. Accept reduced capability against traditional bombers in exchange for improved defense against suicidal attacks. The trade-off worked because kamikazes had become the primary threat. Admiral Nimitz learned about Rodriguez's technique through fleet reports in March 1945. He ordered the innovation implemented across the entire Pacific Fleet. Every radar-equipped ship would maintain dedicated low-altitude scanning protocols. The change became standard doctrine within 6 weeks. Rodriguez never received official recognition. No medal, no commendation, no mention in battle reports. He'd violated direct orders to sound a general alarm. Technically, that was insubordination regardless of the outcome. The Navy couldn't reward violations of the chain of command, even successful ones.
He finished the war as a petty officer 2nd class, returned to Los Angeles, worked for Hughes Aircraft, developing civilian radar systems. He applied lessons learned watching kamikaze tactics to designing air traffic control equipment. His civilian innovations were patented, profitable, publicly credited. The military innovations remained classified until 1963. Even then, Rodriguez's name didn't appear in the declassified documents. The low-altitude scanning technique was attributed to operational analysis by fleet radar personnel. The specific circumstances, the unauthorized alarm, the court-martial threat, all disappeared from the official record. Rodriguez died in 1987. His obituary mentioned his work at Hughes Aircraft, his patents for air traffic control radar, his service aboard the Missouri during World War II. It didn't mention February 15, 1945. Didn't mention 60 kamikazes approaching at wave-top level. Didn't mention the alarm that saved the Pacific Fleet. But every air traffic controller in America uses radar techniques that trace back to that morning. The low-altitude scanning protocols, the split coverage doctrine, the assumption that threats approach from unexpected directions. Rodriguez's innovation survived in civilian aviation long after military classification buried its origins. Sometimes the most important tactical breakthroughs come from the least important people, not from staff officers or academy graduates, but from enlisted technicians who see problems nobody else notices, who violate orders when doctrine fails, who sound alarms when protocol demands silence. Rodriguez proved that survival sometimes requires insubordination, that seeing clearly matters more than following blindly, that one seaman's unauthorized decision can change how fleets defend themselves forever.